We're going to go ahead and call to order the City of Wilmington Board of Adjustments meeting for Thursday, January 18th, 2024. It is 1 o'clock. Before we get started, we'll ask everyone that's going to speak today to be sworn in.
All right, I'll ask that staff, applicants, and members of the public who wish to speak to stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll next read the Board of Adjustments introduction. Hearings before the Board of Adjustment are quasi-judicial in nature. Decisions of the board are based on the record of these proceedings. To grant a variance requires a concurrent vote of 4/5 of the members of the board. To reverse or modify termination of an administrative official requires a simple majority. Evidence submitted to the board for review becomes part of the record. Appeals of the board's decisions are to Superior Court and are based on the record. Appeals must be filed within 30 days of the date of filing of the board's order in the Planning Division. A hearing before the board is conducted in accordance with rules of procedure. Those who want to testify in a case are sworn as witnesses. The chairperson recognizes those that want to testify or their attorney for presentation of evidence during the hearing. To ensure all testimony is properly recorded, you would please come forward to address the board, state your name, address, and speak clearly. All right. The first item on our agenda will be the approval of the minutes from the December 21st, 2023 meeting. Is there a motion as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
All right, there's been a motion. Is there a second? There's been a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Those are approved. Our item on the agenda is old business. It relates to 6450 Shinwood Road. It's a variance under Chapter 18, Land Development Code, Section 18-270, subsection B, subsection 12, to allow more than 2 feet of fill in a coastal A flood, special flood hazard area. We'll recognize Catherine for the city.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. This is a request for a waiver at 6450 Shinwood Road to the city's floodplain standards. This property is zoned R20, Residential Legacy District, and contains a 6,171 square foot dwelling that was constructed around 1977, according to New Hanover County tax records. This property is located in a special flood hazard area, zone Coastal A, with a base flood elevation of 13 feet above mean sea level. The Coastal A zone is considered a high hazard area due to the likelihood of breaking wave heights that are between 1.5 and 3 feet. Within the Coastal A zone, with a BFE of 13 feet, the lowest horizontal member of structures must be elevated at or above 15 feet above mean sea level. Based on an elevation certificate from Mike Tackett dated September 2nd, 2011, the existing house is constructed with a finished floor at 14.21 feet above mean sea level and a finished basement at 4.45 feet above mean sea level. The existing structure, excluding the basement, is 1.79 feet lower than the regulatory flood level. The applicant has proposed to remove non-conforming living space on the ground floor and to elevate the existing structure to above the regulatory flood level. City Code Chapter 18, Section 18270 prohibits the use of fill in coastal high hazard zones for structural support, and it prohibits more than 2 feet of fill for any purpose. Section R322.3.4 of the International Residential Code, also known as the Building Code, requires that slabs used for parking, floors of enclosures, landings, decks, walkways, patios, and similar uses that are beneath buildings or located such that they could be undermined or displaced and could cause damage, either be structurally independent or self-supporting such that they will remain intact under flood conditions, taking into account scour and erosion, and have building foundations that are capable of resisting any added loads due to the presence of the slabs. 44 CFR and the North Carolina State Building Code requires that all structures within a coastal A zone comply with standards for V-zone construction. That's construction for high velocity zones. Within a V-zone, structures must be either free of obstruction, elevated on pilings, or constructed with walls that are designed to break apart during flood events without damaging the structural integrity of the building or adjacent property. The applicant would be required to comply with building code standards, the Code of Federal Regulations, regardless of any variance issued by the Board of Adjustment. On August 7, 2023, planning staff accepted an application for a waiver to the city's flood standards for a coastal high hazard zone to allow 3 feet of fill. This matter was continued from the October 19, 2023 meeting of the Board of Adjustment to allow the applicant time to demonstrate compliance with the Land Development Code, the International Residential Code, and the Code of Federal Regulations pertaining to the structural changes. This matter is set for hearing before you today, January 18th, 2024. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have of city staff, and the applicant is also present to give a presentation. And I'll just go through the attachments. I'd like to submit the attachments and the case summary into the record. This is showing the flood zone. The red line on the map is showing the limits of moderate wave action, where you're expected to have the elevated flood heights, or wave heights, I'm sorry. This is the site plan submitted by the applicant. You can see in blue that says the fill location. That's the approximate location of the proposed fill. These are photos, black and white photos, showing water coming up around the house and inside the basement of the subject property. Any questions of staff?
Does anyone have questions of Catherine at this time? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead and acknowledge the applicant and the agent. Matthew Nichols, you.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Matt Nichols. I'm an attorney here in Wilmington, 3205 Randall Parkway, Suite 104. And I'm here today representing the applicant owner, Michael Pollock. And we did have a slide presentation, and appreciate the board's time this afternoon. I think the pictures really explain the request. And we're also here, my client's engineer, Mike Copeland with Seacoast Engineering is also here. So I'll get right to the photos here. I know the board is familiar with the vicinity, but I thought this was a good overhead to show. You can sort of see Wrightsville Beach in the far distance on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, and then Greenville Sound, and we've identified the subject property with the yellow star there. The next slide's a closer up image of my client's property, and as Ms. Thurston pointed out, on the subdivision map, and this map was recorded back in '91, it's Lot 1B of this division as shown there in yellow. And there's an access easement to get to the property off of Inlet View Drive. And then we've got a series of photographs, and we were going to walk around the property to help explain to the board sort of the layout of the lot, and then what gives rise to the request for the variance. There is a flood elevation certificate in the board's packet, and as Ms. Thurston mentioned, the property, the structure is not in conformity with the current flood regulations. And one thing I'll mention, and we'll probably repeat this throughout the presentation, that what my client's trying to do is bring the structure into compliance with current regulations, which is a really good thing. He's planning to elevate his house, which he purchased in 2010, and it's his wife, and Mike and his wife Meredith, it's their primary residence. And elevate the house, get it in conformity with the current regulations. And as you'll see, there's living space on the ground floor, and that's really not permitted now. And he's going to get rid of the habitable space on the ground floor. So I think there's a lot of benefit to that. And in doing so, what we're asking the board to consider is, my understanding is the code currently allows him to bring in 2 feet of fill. And what he would like to do is add up to one additional foot of fill under the existing structure, and then in the immediate vicinity of the structure that would sort of taper off. So he's not proposing to put a foot of fill over the entire lot. It's to put it under the existing structure, and then it would sort of taper, as we'll show on the exhibit. But that's essentially the nature of the request. So this is the front of the house, and in a couple of these photographs, you'll see, just in reference to, it's really got a pretty magnificent tree in the front yard there, and you'll see throughout the photos that's sort of a reference point. I may ask Mike to come up, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay. He could
Yeah,
help narrate this. I think it might be more efficient, so.
No, that's fine.
Mike, I'll have you come up, please, and introduce yourself.
I'm Michael Pollock, the owner of the property, 6450 Shenwood Road.
And Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as we go through this, I'll maybe say some things, and then if it's okay, Mike might add some things just to.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. So the front of the house here, again, you can see what's essentially sort of a living space on the ground floor. And the low point of the property, Mike, you would say, is that generally what we're looking at now?
Yeah, the garage and entry elevation is pretty close to the elevation of the front yard itself, maybe 6, 8 inches above, but the front yard is kind of the holding tank of water in big rain events, and it eventually works its way to the marsh to the side of the property.
Yeah, and we'll show with some of these photos. So this is looking more straight on at the house, and then sort of on the south side here, you can see the neighbor's house to the south. We'll have some additional photos that show that. And then if you look back toward the tree, you can see the water in the distance, and then again, the tree there on the right-hand side of the screen. This is essentially your front yard, Mike.
That's the front of the property.
Yeah, and it's a little hard to tell in these photos, but, and I've been out there and looked at it, but just visually, there's sort of a bowl effect there in the front, or is that, can you
Yeah,
explain that,
and-
Mike?
and
Mr. Pollock, I'm going to ask that you step to the mic when you're talking. I hate to make y'all go back and forth, but
I think the biggest thing is in any substantial rain event, that front yard will hold 12 inches of water. And then, at some moment, that water's starting to work into the house. In a perfect world, if we're able to raise the house, I don't mind the holding tank. I just want the house outside of any, other than a substantial storm event. We're trying to get that slab, which is now at 4.4, above. The bulkhead is 6 feet. The pool is 6 feet, so the house sits in a hole. And it's, it goes back to the house, that slab was built in 77. The adjacent house was built, and in the process, if you can see in the slides, it sits up a couple feet higher today than our house.
So I'll go, and please stop me at any time if you have questions about any of the photos, but I'll try to go through them quickly here. This is the back of the house, and there's the pool that Mr. Pollock mentioned. If you were to sort of turn around there, you would see the same pool, and that's sort of looking out toward the water. And then you can see the property itself, the high ground's it's really not that far off the water in this vicinity. And then turning back to the back of the house, I'll first talk about the south side of the house, and then we'll go around to the other side just to show the board sort of the layout of the lot. That's the south side of the property, and a couple of these photos, I don't know, Mike, if you can comment on the elevation change between your property and your neighbors?
Yeah, that one somewhat shows what I'd mentioned. My neighbor, his slab and as people walk by the side of the house, I think they're all 10 foot tall because the grade is 3 foot higher on the other side of the brick wall. But here again, that was done years after this house was built.
So going back, staying on this same side of the property, this would be the same side of the property as you were looking out toward the water.
Yes.
Yes. And then moving around to the other side of the house, the north side of the house, just a few more photos. I'll talk about that white fence here in a second, but on the other side of that white fence, we've got some photos, and that's an easement or walkway for your neighbor. Has an easement across a portion of that property to get to the water. Here's a little closer up view of the what's like the northwest corner of the house. And then that's essentially the north side of the house, and you can see the same tree that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation those are the same limbs from that big oak tree. Okay, so going back to the, what I mentioned about on the other side of that fence, the next few slides will show you what's on the other side of that fence. And you can see the walkway there on the right-hand side, but it's essentially marshy area.
Let me point out that slide, you can see all of the marsh grass that's on the sidewalk. That's how the tide will get up to that level. And in king tide events, we've been flooded in the house because the water literally comes up to a level that fills in the elevation of the house.
Just a few more pictures here, and then I'll show a few pictures of the inside of the house. Just a closer up view of that same walkway. Just another vantage point of the property to the north, and that's the property to the north. And you can see it's fairly wet there. And then the downstairs of the house, just to show you a few photos there of, well, I don't know, Mike, if you want to comment on that, like the elevation there.
If you remember this photo, there's a photo of a major rain event where you can see that the water flooded the house, but was still not up to the level of the pool. It was rain coming in. This area has nowhere to go because it's in a hole.
So the inside of the house is finished, livable space, and like I said, that wouldn't be allowed today. And this would all be, with the proposed renovations, there would be no habitable space on the ground floor, but it would be enclosed.
Enclosed storage.
With breakaway
and just-
walls and things. Yes.
Built to today's codes.
Yeah. Just some other photos. You can see the driveway and the distance in that photo. That's sort of the downstairs door. And there's some other space in the downstairs. So, Mike, you want to explain this photo?
Well, that can sum it up pretty well. That is a storm event
Move up a little bit, Mike.
where the water basically has nowhere to go until it can work its way back out to the marsh next door. So the water will accumulate there. It doesn't drain back to the intercoastal there. It drains to the side. And as I said, I don't have a problem with the front yard holding water. I just don't want it in the house. And I also want to add that what we're doing, we bought that house because of the tree. We're not going to do anything that doesn't protect the tree. That's the slide I was referring to, that you can see we've got 6 inches of water in the house as that picture was taken.
I think that's all the photographs. This is a closer up image of what's in the staff packet as far as the fill location. Again, the vast majority of the proposed fill would be under the existing structure, which would be raised. And then there would be additional fill above the 2 feet, sort of tapering down to it meets the allowable level without the variance. And so again, we're here asking the board to consider an additional 1 foot of non-structural fill on just a portion of the subject property. And Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to go through all the criteria. I know that's for the board's consideration. I won't go through each of them in detail, but I think the main things I would emphasize would be it would bring the property into more conformity with what you would have to do today. And I think when you're sort of remedying these non-conforming older houses from a floodplain standpoint, it's almost always a really good thing to do. So I think it would meet the spirit and intent of what the regulations are trying to do, and then allowing the additional fill, we would contend, is something that would help facilitate that and get the new elevated structure, it's not a new structure, but the elevated project. It would help with that, with the level of investment that's going in that to keep the water out of the house. So again, we're glad to talk about any of these in particular if the board has a question about any of the criteria, but this is in the packet where there is non-structural fill allowed, and again, this would be just for the additional foot and limited portions of the lot. And then, in summary, I won't try to repeat myself, but we're going to essentially make a non-conforming property substantially more conforming, and it's going to help prevent flooding with the existing structure in the future. And Mr. Pollock's trying to ask for sort of the minimal variance request that would help achieve the benefit of what he's trying to do, and it would just be really in the vicinity and underneath the home. So with that said, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we're glad to try to answer any questions. We appreciate your consideration of the request. And Mike, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I just want to, the purpose of the extra foot, if you take the slab that's there now at 4.4, you add 3 feet, that's 7.4, and a 4-inch slab, it gets you almost to 8 feet. The bulkhead's at 6. That's reasonable. We don't ever expect to be bulletproof from any storm, but if the house was built today, that's where it would be as a minimum.
Okay. Questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I have one. Have you been able to prove that it won't have a negative impact on the neighbors or in the surrounding area as far as flooding goes and things like that?
Could you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so for the extra foot of fill that you're requesting, have you been able to prove or have you done a study that shows that it's not going to impact your neighbors as far as runoff and different things like that? And I guess my concern is if you're adding an extra foot, is that going to impact your neighbors negatively?
We have not done a study, but I think the fact that we're not doing anything to change drainage. So this would have no impact on drainage because it always goes, you know, any excessive rain events or storm events, water will come into the property from in front. And if you're in a hurricane, it's going to go out. We try to jokingly tell ourselves that we're in a toilet. You know, the water comes in, water goes out. But the house itself does not, raising it or leaving it alone does not change any existing drainage patterns.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else questions for the applicant right now? All right, thank you. Do you have any other people you want to have bring any information? Like, I know you mentioned the engineer. Do you need them to present anything, or are you good? We can always leave it for questions.
Answer questions, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to give you the chance in case you wanted to do that.
Yes.
But you can have it again if you need it.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Does the city have any questions of the applicant? I should have asked that while he was up there.
Just to confirm, the applicant stated that the lower level would only be used for storage and access. Just wanted to confirm that.
Yes, no habitable space on the ground level when the project's completed, correct, yeah.
All right, thank you. Anything else? Catherine, you good? All right.
Nothing at this time.
All right, we're going to go ahead and open the evidentiary hearing. This is for anyone that's wanting to present additional information or materials related to this matter. I ask if you decide to speak, if you come forward, state your name and address. Looks like we don't have any, so I will, before we come out of this, ask that the city or the applicant has anything during this that you'd like to talk about. You'll have a chance to talk after I close it. Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the evidentiary hearing at this time. Anything else from the city on this?
I'll just note that the project would still be required to comply with New Hanover County Building Code, State Building Code, and a V-zone certification would still be required to show that the existing and any new slab is frangible and would break apart into small enough pieces during a flood event that it wouldn't damage the property or surrounding properties.
Right, yes, thank you. Anything from applicant?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay, all right, we'll have some discussion if we have any questions for staff and that. Anybody, questions? Any thoughts related? Ultimately, building code will sort of encompass any issues that are outside our purview, so ours is very focused.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with this request, and I'd be willing to grant a motion to approve it.
All right, there's a motion for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, there's a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? That passes unanimously. All right, thank you. Thank you. Is there, being that that's our only item, which is a treat, but, is there anything else for us today?
For asking, I would like to introduce to you our new associate planner, Grace LeMay. She'll be attending the Board of Adjustment from here on out and hopefully presenting before you soon.
All right, welcome. Yeah, thank you. Anybody have anything for the rest of the day? Well then, let's go home. Thank you.